At a public high school in a certain city, 16-year-old Dominic used to be a boy with a spark in his eyes. When he first enrolled, he volunteered to join the math competition, staying after school every day to work on problems until dark. But he finished dead last in 2 straight preliminary rounds. When the teacher handed him a registration form for the 3rd competition, he shoved it back sharply, head down, and mumbled, "Just count me out. No matter how hard I study, I'll never beat anyone anyway." Later, even with basic homework the teacher assigned, he often left it blank and didn't turn it in, not because he couldn't do it, but because he truly felt deep down, doing it is pointless. What happened to Dominic is exactly the famous learned helplessness effect in psychology. Behind this seemingly giving up on effort behavior lies a repeatedly verified psychological mechanism. It not only influences an individual's choices, but also quietly plays a role in education, the workplace, mental health, and other areas. From lab to life, what is learned helplessness? The concept of learned helplessness first came from psychologist Martin Seligman's classic 1967 experiment. In the experiment, Seligman divided dogs into 2 groups. The first group was locked in cages, and every time a buzzer sounded, they received inescapable electric shocks. They struggled and jumped, but could never escape the pain. The second group never went through this uncontrollable shock experience. A few days later, when both groups were placed in a new cage where escape was easy, they just had to jump over a low barrier to avoid the shocks. Something strange happened. The second group jumped over the barrier right away to escape as soon as they heard the buzzer. But the first group just lay there whimpering. Even when the shock started, they no longer tried to escape. From their experience of being unable to avoid the shocks, they had learned a belief: my actions can't change the outcome. Trying harder is useless. Later, Seligman and his colleagues extended this experiment to humans. They had college students face an unsolvable noise problem. No matter how they adjusted the buttons, the ear-piercing noise wouldn't stop. After a while, when the researchers gave them new solvable problems, most of the students who'd gone through the uncontrollable noise experience acted passive and lazy, even giving up trying altogether. More importantly, their helplessness didn't just stay with the noise task, it spilled over into other tasks. Even with simple puzzle games, they'd subconsciously say, "I definitely can't figure this out." From this, Seligman formally defined learned helplessness: when an individual repeatedly experiences negative events they can't control, they gradually form the belief that actions have nothing to do with outcomes. They then give up on active attempts, and even when opportunities to change the outcome arise later, they continue to stay in a passive state. Psychologically, the core of learned helplessness is a distorted attribution style. When people face failure, they usually explain why it happened. If they attribute failure to something temporary, external, and controllable, like "I didn't prepare well this time," or "the questions were too hard," they're less likely to fall into helplessness. But if they attribute it to something permanent, internal, and uncontrollable, like "I'm just naturally stupid," or "I'll never be good at this," they'll gradually believe that outcomes are determined by fate, not my own actions. That's exactly the psychological path Dominic took, from failing the competition to giving up on homework. Real-world reflections of learned helplessness, how it shows up in education, work, and mental health. Learned helplessness isn't just an abstract theory, it has concrete manifestations in many areas of society. Behind these cases, we can also see psychological intervention ideas for different fields. Education. Minority students trapped by low expectations. In the education system, learned helplessness is one of the invisible barriers facing minority students. A 2022 survey by the National Education Association, NEA, found that about 38% of Latino high school students and 41% of African American high school students show obvious signs of learned helplessness in subjects like math and science. They generally believe They're naturally bad at these subjects and even actively avoid slightly more challenging courses. The root of this helplessness often ties to the negative side of the teacher expectation effect. In some public schools, due to historical gaps between groups, some teachers unconsciously hold lower expectations for minority students. In class, for example, they're more likely to assign challenging problems to certain groups, while giving minority students simple, repetitive tasks. When minority students make mistakes, they're more likely to be labeled lacking ability rather than having a temporary slip-up. After being in this environment for a long time, students gradually attribute bad grades to "I'm just naturally not cut out for this" instead of "I haven't gotten enough challenges or guidance." As Maria, an African-American high school student, put it, in middle school, I asked my teacher about a geometry problem, but she told me, "This is too hard for you. Just focus on getting the multiple choice questions right first." After that, I never asked again. Anyway, even if I try to learn it, I won't. Workplace: the silence dilemma for women engineers in tech. In the tech industry, which prides itself on innovation, learned helplessness is quietly holding back women engineers' career development. A 2023 employee diversity report from a tech company showed that women engineers propose technical ideas 27% less often than men, and 42% of those women said, "After my proposals were ignored or rejected so many times, I figured there's no point in trying anymore." This dilemma grows out of implicit bias in the workplace. Many women engineers get interrupted by male colleagues when sharing ideas in meetings, or their opinions are ignored until a male colleague repeats the same point, and then it gets attention. Some women are also turned down when applying for project leadership roles, told they lack experience, even when their qualifications match those of male candidates. Time and time again, trying to speak up but not being seen, makes many women engineers gradually believe, "My ideas don't matter," or "Even if I fight for it, I won't get the opportunity." Emily, a 32-year-old software engineer, told MIT Technology Review, "I brought up algorithm optimization plans 3 times in team meetings and got no response." Then a male colleague said the exact same thing, and the boss immediately went, "That's a great idea." After that, I never spoke up voluntarily in meetings again. It's useless to say anything anyway. Mental health: the depression cycle for the unemployed. After a financial crisis, there were a lot of long-term unemployed people, and learned helplessness became a major driver pushing many into depression. Research by psychological associations found that among people who'd been unemployed for more than 6 months, about 57% showed signs of learned helplessness. They not only gave up on actively job hunting, but also gradually lost their sense of control over life, stopping regular daily routines, neglecting personal hygiene, and even turning down help from friends. The psychological shift for these unemployed people is very typical. At first, they actively send out resumes and go to interviews. But after repeatedly getting no replies or failed interviews, they start doubting their abilities. When the number of failures piles up, they shift from temporary attributions like, "I didn't prepare well for this interview," to permanent ones like, "I'm too old, no one will hire me," or "I have no competitive edge at all." Finally, they stop sending resumes, even afraid to open job search websites, because "I'll never find a job anyway, so why waste time?" This helplessness and depression feed off each other. Helplessness makes them give up acting, and doing nothing worsens their self-doubt. They end up trapped in a cycle. The more helpless I feel, the less I act. The less I act, the more helpless I get. Breaking free from helplessness. Psychological solutions. Learned helplessness isn't an irreversible, psychological terminal illness. Psychological research shows that by adjusting cognition, reshaping experiences, and building support systems, individuals can completely break out of the helplessness trap. In education, some public schools have started promoting growth mindset teaching methods to fight learned helplessness. This approach comes from psychologist Carol Dweck's research, and its core is helping students understand abilities can be improved through effort. They're not fixed at birth. For example, at a high school in one city, when a student fails a test, the teacher doesn't say, "You did badly this time." Instead, they say, "You haven't mastered this knowledge point yet. Let's figure out where the problem is together." They also share stories of scientists and entrepreneurs who succeeded after multiple failures to help students understand failure is part of learning. Data shows that in classes using this method, minority students' math scores rose by an average of 23%, and the number of students volunteering for competitions nearly doubled. In the workplace, some tech companies have set up mentorship programs for women engineers, using success experiences to help them rebuild confidence. Mentors actively pay attention to women employees' ideas and speak up for them in meetings, like, "The point Emily brought up earlier is important. Let's dive deeper into that." They also help women secure leadership roles in small projects, so that through completing tasks, the women rediscover the feeling that my actions can change the outcome. Among women engineers in the program, 68% said they're willing to speak up proactively again, and the rate of their proposals being adopted rose by 35%. In mental health, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is an effective way to intervene in learned helplessness. Therapists help the unemployed reframe their attributions. For example, when someone says, "I can't find a job because I'm useless," the therapist will guide them to recall past experiences of successfully finding jobs or analyze, "Maybe this interview failed because the competition was too fierce, not because you're not capable." At the same time, therapists help set small goals like send 3 resumes today or call one company for inquiries tomorrow, so that the unemployed gradually regain a sense of control over life as they complete these small tasks. Research shows that unemployed people who received CBT were 40% more likely to get reemployed than those who didn't, and their depressive symptoms also eased significantly. Don't let helplessness define your life. At its core, learned helplessness is a cognitive bias held hostage by experience from past failures. We wrongly conclude that the future can't be changed either, but we ignore that circumstances change, abilities grow, and opportunities come. As Seligman later wrote in Learned Optimism, helplessness can be learned, but so can optimism. Whether it's Dominic at that city's high school or women engineers in tech, they're not naturally incompetent. They're just temporarily trapped in the belief that trying is useless. The key to breaking that belief might lie in one small success experience, solving a math problem you once couldn't, having an idea recognized by colleagues, or getting even a small job. These tiny moments of a sense of control are like beams of light, gradually chasing away the shadow of helplessness. In this uncertain world, we'll inevitably face failure. We'll all have moments when we think trying is useless. But remember, one failure doesn't mean permanent failure. Temporary loss of control doesn't mean permanent loss of control. True growth isn't never making mistakes. It's still being willing to try again, even after acknowledging failure might happen. Because you never know, your next try could be the start of a change. Subscribe to my channel for more psychology knowledge every day.